Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle. And in this video, I got myself a nice little comic haul to share with you guys here today. Went to a local comic show this past weekend, spent about $320 or so. So I picked up a lot of cool stuff that I'm gonna talk about, flip through some of the books, talk about why I picked it up. And then overall, I kind of want to just talk a little bit about two different factors with regards to kind of my takeaways from the show. Number one, kind of, seeing some of the books and how the mighty have fallen in terms of their values and their prices. And then number two, also talk a little bit about, just the feeling amongst comic book collectors at the show. While I do think that there was a lot of enthusiasm, I also kind of feel like there was a lot of apathy towards picking up some of the bigger keys. But before I get into the video, if you guys could drop me a like or comment or subscribe if you're enjoying the content, helps support the channel doing those things, I appreciate it. But let's get into this video here today. We got to start with the fun stuff, right? We got to flip through some of the books. Now, I kind of went into the show. It was near Mint Sundays, by the way. I've been to the show a couple times before. I've made some videos. Great show. It's a one-day show, so unfortunately, wasn't able to really do any filming or, talk to some of the dealers. But don't fret. I will definitely be going to Los Angeles Comic Con, and I will definitely put together like a cool video for us, and I'll definitely do my talk to the dealer type of video because I would love to hear a lot of people's sort of opinions on kind of the state of the market, especially now with where we are in the current economy. But I went into this show, and just kind of went around, didn't have any expectations, just tried to find good deals and cool books where I could find them. And this one right here is probably the coolest book that I found for myself personally. But the first book I was able to pick up for myself was actually going to be Strange Tales number 115. Very cool Silver Age Strange Tales book right here. What is the significance of this? Well, there's actually a few things that make this book pretty cool. Number one, it is the origin of Doctor Strange. Pretty cool overall. I mean, Doctor Strange, obviously one of the big kind of Marvel characters there is in all of comic books. Obviously, he made his first appearance 5 issues earlier in 110, and this would actually be the book that would kind of be his origin story with him sort of having the car accident and then kind of discovering, this sort of Eastern kind of mysticism and things like that and becoming Doctor Strange. This also would be the origin of Baron Mordo, which is also pretty cool as like a little, secondary factor. Additionally, this is actually the second appearance of the Sandman right there. Would you believe it? Obviously, Sandman made his first appearance in ASM number 4. And one of the things I feel like with ASM number 4 is like, I don't know how you guys feel, but I feel like that cover is, leaves a lot to be desired for the Sandman character. I think one of the reasons why that book isn't more valuable is that the cover isn't, kind of this very dynamic, singular pose. It has the panel thing, which, some people like, but I know a lot of collectors don't like it. But for me, this is probably the coolest, early Sandman cover you can get right there. So definitely a very, very cool book. Also has some other significance. I think it's like the first mention of Dormammu and things like that. But a very cool book regardless. One that I usually, in the Strange Tales sections, I usually don't see this one as often. The guy had it listed at $125, and I was looking at it, and I was like, $125, it's an okay price. Maybe I would consider picking it up if I really wanted it. And he was like, well, let me shoot you an offer. And I was like, all right, what do you got? And he's like, how about $75? And I was like, done. 75. I will take a low grade Strange Tales 115 all day. So I was able to pick up this book. Very, very cool. I like the old Strange Tales covers with Human Torch on them personally. I love it when the Strange Tales trade dress didn't have the split factor yet, where they kind of incorporated all the Nick Fury stuff, where it's just Strange Tales at the top. I just love how the aesthetics of that book look. All right, the next book I picked up here is another cool kind of Silver Age book, and one that I think is kind of undervalued, or at least, some of these books within, this run I think are still undervalued at this current time. But this one right here is Daredevil number 6. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this will be the first appearance of Mr. Fear right there. Mr. Fear, great Wally Wood cover, in this early kind of Daredevil run when he was still kind of wearing his yellow suit. This one was listed at $70. The guy gave me a deal, got it for $60, which was, I think, a good price overall. And this is a cool book. I think a lot of the Daredevil books that are kind of in this early section, I'd say sub number 10 or so, have a lot of potential. I mean, hard to say that books are undervalued in this current market. We don't know what's going on with the, kind of global economy and where book prices will ultimately correct to. But, generally speaking, I do think that knowing that we're going to get a lot of Daredevil storylines in the future, there's a lot of rogue gallery of Daredevil villains that haven't quite got their pop cultural due just yet. We have, the first appearance of Al. We have the first appearance of Mr. Fear right here. We have the first appearance of Stiltman, the Matador, characters like that, maybe at some point they could get kind of a cool kind of revamp in some kind of way in like a Daredevil show or whatever, and they could have some significance. I mean, I think Mr. Fear is really interesting, being that, if I was behind the scenes sort of writing a Daredevil storyline, knowing that Daredevil is the man without fear. I mean, Mr. Fear is kind of like the perfect villain to sort of set up both a like physical battle and sort of a thematic battle in this idea of fear. So I think that this is a cool book regardless. Cool Wally Wood cover. Happy to add it to the PC. All right, this next book I picked up here is a book that kind of makes me go back to what I said at the beginning of the video, which is that fall from grace sort of situation. I got to give you guys a little bit of preface. I literally bought this book because I felt bad for it. This has never happened to me before. I was actually flipping through the bins. This book didn't even have the decency to be on the wall. It was a bin book. I was flipping through the bins, and when I saw this book just sitting there, certainly passed over many times over by collectors, just with this price tag, I was like, I just felt bad for it. I had to buy it. And this book right here is, of course, Eternals #1. I got for list price was $25. The guy even gave it to me for 20, so I didn't have to break a second bill. I mean, can you believe that? I got this for $20. I mean, it's super, super sad. This is probably like a VF copy or so. So, it's not a 9.8 candidate, but $20, man. First appearance of Eternals, first appearance of Icarus. This book, what are you going to say about it? I mean, maybe it's overcorrected. Maybe it hasn't overcorrected. Maybe nobody actually cares about the Eternals, but I still kind of have the belief that, all it's going to take is sort of one kind of Thor Ragnarok movie where they kind of redo the whole idea of the Eternals. You can see Richard Madden taking that character and being very, very charismatic. I know he flew into the sun, but obviously he's still alive. They're not going to kill the character. I think that we will see Icarus again one day, and it'll be interesting to see kind of what, happens with these Eternals books once the market starts to see them in pop culture again. But obviously I was flipping through the Eternals section, so let me jump to the next book here and carry on the conversation. I was able to get an Eternals #2 for $10 right there. This right here is the first appearance of Ajax, who is Selma Hayek's character, but also more importantly, the first appearance of the Celestials. And I really do think, I mean, obviously they set up the Celestial plot. It seems like, what they're going to do at some point in the future is maybe some of the Kang's technology is going to relate to the Celestials. I'm sure at some crazy point in Secret Wars, the Kang will be living inside of like a celestial head and Battle World, or they'll do some stuff like that. And I think that they will connect a lot of this like celestial plot line and technology to what's going on with Kang overall. And I think we're going to get more celestial stories in the future. I mean, they're certainly going to introduce Silver Surfer and Galactus at some point. I'm sure that they will tie that to the celestial storyline. And I think that these are still cool books overall. I mean, granted, nobody really liked the Eternals, but generally speaking, just because the movie was a flop doesn't make these books completely valueless. I mean, they're still, Jack Kirby's creation from the 70s. And when you got prices like that, I will happily sweep the floor for those two books. All right, this next book right here is another Fall from Grace book. I mean, this was the whole story of the haul. Like, just going out there, flipping through the bins, just seeing books that, at this particular price, it's like, I just felt like I had to buy it. But this one right here is Moon Knight #1, of course, from 1980. And what is the significance of this? Well, this would be the origin of Moon Knight, the first solo ongoing series, the first appearance of Khonshu, the first appearance of Bushman, and a very cool book. Obviously, one of the more popular Bronze Age books out there. This one was listed at 25. I think he gave it to me for 20 because I bought a few books from him. And this is probably like a VF copy or so, right? So it's not, a 9.8 candidate, but, for $20, I feel like this is the perfect kind of value I would happily pay for a book like this. I mean, it's really interesting to see kind of where this book sits. The problem with it is that there's just so many on the census, and there's so many people that are always looking to sell. That's one of the things that we kind of have to remember, is that, someone out there is always trying to sell their book, right? It doesn't matter, what key it is. It doesn't matter like how rare it is. There's always someone out there that is trying to sell that book. And if, you're a book that has a census of, 10,000 plus, who knows how many raw copies there are always going to be people out there that are trying to sell it, and that's going to create all that downward pressure to where, the floor price is always going to be a little bit tumultuous. So it's really interesting to see this book fall to like that $20 price point, at least for me. I mean, I actually don't think that you could get this book for $20 off of eBay. I think you still have to pay around that $40 or $50 price point. But that's why I picked it up, because, it's still a cool book regardless. Next book here, I was flipping through the Moon Knight section, and I got me another Moon Knight book, another kind of spec book that really fell from grace. Now, I think that this one might have just been underpriced, but this one right here is Moon Knight #3, which I got for $3 right there on the price tag. And what is the significance of this? Well, this is the first appearance of the character known as Midnight Man. We all know we got Midnight Man in the Moon Knight show. Definitely kind of I think a one-off character. Unfortunately, that actor actually did pass away, so it does feel like, that particular version of the character, that storyline might be sort of wrapped up. But this is still a cool book. This is still a cool character overall. I remember Midnight, or at least the son of Midnight Man, kind of carrying on in sort of the Mark Spector Moon Knight series, and I have like kind of an affinity towards that because Midnight was a character that sort of had this kind of storyline in the Amazing Spider-Man run when Mark Bagley was writing, Darkhawk and Moon Knight and Spider-Man all together. But this is still a cool book, one that like really, was hot in the market earlier this year, really fell off. I think that's one of the things with a lot of the kind of spec-ish books and things like that is, if you're out there and you're diligent and you're always kind of looking, you will from time to time see them kind of in back bins, sort of, at really good deals, because there's going to be ones out there that, people are not paying attention to. All right, this next book here is actually one that, I don't actually think I've ever personally owned this one, and I've always wanted it, but I've never wanted to pay whatever the prices were for it. But when I saw it at this price, given that it's a pretty high grade of this thing overall, I decided to pick it up. This one right here is Iron Man number 282. And what is the significance of this? Well, this would be the first full appearance, let's call it, of the War Machine armor. Now, for my money, when we're talking about the War Machine character, although this is technically Tony Stark in the armor right here, I still feel like this is the go-to book to get if you are a fan of the War Machine character. I do think that there are a lot of cool War Machine books, like the West Coast Avengers book. I know that there's a technical first appearance in 281 that comes prior to this one, and I know that there's War Machine #1, the solo series and stuff like that. But I still think that this is the book that you want for War Machine. I feel like this book has really kind of fallen off a lot. I mean, generally where it sells now is probably kind of right in line to where you should expect to pay for kind of a Copper Age book like this. I think this is one of the cooler kind of Copper Age books that came out during that time period. I mean, how badass is that cover with like the pink spray paint over the Iron Man? I think that is so cool. And I think that, War Machine is a cool character overall. I think that obviously we're going to get Armor Wars at some point later on in the future, probably get a lot more Don Cheadle War Machine storylines. I'm sure he'll be a character involved heavily in the Avengers films later on. And I think that this is a really cool book. One that's like kind of just good to have for the collection. I mean, shout out to Alex the Comic Book Hoarder. He's always talking about kind of like those staple books that you want to have in collections. And when I think of Copper Age books, I think that this one always kind of stands out amongst kind of just a row of books that you might have from the Copper Age. So Iron Man 282, got it for $60. Basically a near mint copy, and I thought that was a pretty good price overall, and that's just one I'm just happy to kind of add to the PC. All right, this next book here is one that I bought because, one, it is a cool book, kind of an interesting spec, but number two, I bought it to prove a point. But this one right here is Thor number 129, and what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this is the first appearance of the character known as Ares, kind of a spec character that a lot of people are thinking like, okay, that might be the next sort of introduction into kind of the Thor mythos. Obviously, we got Hercules in Thor Love and Thunder, and in Thor Ragnarok, they kind of had all the heads and statues of the characters that were on that building. They kind of showed Beta Ray Bill. They had a character that looked a lot like Ares. And a lot of people were thinking like, oh, Ares might be the character that eventually they sort of bring in next into the Thor mythos. And this book right here had been one that had been spec'd on for quite some time. And I had actually made a video where I was talking about $50 keys to maybe invest in or to pick up. And I did mention Thor number 129. And I remember there was a comment that was like, there's no way you can get that book for $50. Well, here you go. I got it for $20 just to prove a point, to show you guys that these books are out there. You can definitely find them for that budget range. There were actually two different copies, and one was $50. It was a little bit higher grade than this one, but I always kind of like sort of sweeping the floor for these particular type of books, which is why I decided to go with the little lower grade one. Overall, it's probably like a 3.0. It's got like a chip down there and things like that. But generally speaking, this is kind of a cool book. Great, early Thor run. Definitely cool to have. All right, the next few books I picked up were ones that are just kind of more spec-ish type stuff. This one right here is Amazing Spider-Man number 337. Found this one for $5 right there. Of course, this is the second appearance of the Sinister Six. Just a very, very cool Eric Larson cover. A book that really, really got hot when we had Amazing Spider-Man number 3. Kind of have cooled off as far as like where the prices are, but this is just a book that, you know, I personally have nostalgia for. I always love seeing this thing, and anytime I can find it for, you know, $5 or less, I mean, I feel like that's always going to be a great pickup. Such a cool cover. I mean, this is just so, so cool with how Eric Larson sort of drew, you know, all the Sinister Six with Spider-Man right there. So I will pick that one up every time. This one right here is another kind of great spec book. Found this one for $2, but of course this is West Coast Avengers number 1, just the first appearance of the West Coast Avengers team. Now, I'm not entirely sold on the idea that we are going to be getting a West Coast Avengers. I think we might get some version of that overall, but I don't actually think we're going to get a show that says West Coast Avengers. I'm pretty convinced that as far as Avengers as a name is concerned, Disney will only ever use it for Avengers film, which is why I don't think we're going to get Young Avengers or Dark Avengers or West Coast Avengers. I think they will change the names to like Champions or Thunderbolts or, you know, Wonder Man, the Disney Plus TV show. You know, I think that maybe we can get kind of a West Coast Avengers type of storyline in the Wonder Man show. Maybe we'll see Scarlet Witch and Vision and Hawkeye make cameos in that show. That's what I could generally see. But even if it doesn't happen to name, I still think, you know, a lot of the market still identifies certain key books. And this one over here being the first West Coast Avengers is still a cool book in my opinion. I mean, $2, why not? Pick it up every time. All right, this next book I got right here is another interesting one, especially given the current rumors that, you know, we've kind of got out there in the market. But this one right here is Spider-Man number 5. Now, I've talked about this book a few times before. I've picked up a few copies, generally speaking. But this right here is the first full appearance in the Silver Age of the character known as Morgan Le Fay. Now, Morgan Le Fay, one of the most powerful sort of witchcraft characters out there in sort of the, even just beyond Marvel, I mean, in just sort of any kind of mythos there is. And this is where she makes her first sort of Silver Age appearance. Now, it's really interesting because we know that we're going to be getting Agatha House of Harkness or Coven of Chaos or whatever the show name actually is. And we recently got the announcement that Aubrey Plaza is going to be cast in that show and she's going to be playing a role. And I feel like with an actress of her significance, it seems like she would want kind of a meaty role or a cool role. And I do really feel like, you know, if we think of all the witch characters that could be making an appearance in that show, I feel like Morgan Le Fay definitely comes to mind. And that's why I think that this book is really interesting right here. I think also Spider-Woman number 2 is like the first cameo appearance of her. And then if you actually want her first Golden Age appearance, you'd have to get Black Knight number 1. But it does make sense to sort of bring in that character, tie it to Agatha, tie it to, you know, Dane Whitman Black Knight as well. And they could do a lot of stories with her overall. All right, this next book I picked up is just another cool one, another $2 find. This is Doctor Strange number 4, just the badass cover by Frank Bruner. I feel like Frank Bruner is kind of an artist that is not talked about as much as he should be. He did some of the most amazing covers in the Bronze Age. And this one right here is just, I mean, look at how cool that is. Look at how trippy that is. It's just one of the cool Doctor Strange covers that every time I see it, you know, I always have to kind of smile and take a moment to appreciate it. And, you know, being that this was being sold for $2, I was like, I'm going to pick that up every day. All right, last handful of books before I get to the last one. Of course, I am working on my Avengers Grail run, and I was able to pick up a few Avengers books, so I'll quickly kind of flip through them. Avengers number 40, just another filler run, kind of in the Don Heck era. Got that one for $15. Avengers number 60 right here. This does have some key distinctions. I think it's the marriage of Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne. Got this one for $10. You know, just good to check this one off the list. This one right here is Avengers number 66. This is actually probably the coolest key book I got of the Avengers books I got. But this right here, interestingly enough, is the first appearance of Adamantium. Huh. Very, very interesting. Kind of a cool thing. I think we recently got an announcement that Adamantium is going to be some of the things that is discussed in Captain America number 4. So it'll be interesting to see if this book picks up a little bit in the market. But Avengers number 66, generally speaking, people usually mark this one up, but I was able to get that for $20, which is a pretty good price in my opinion. And then another Avengers book I got right here, Avengers number 74. Nothing specific about this. Got this one for $10. Just another one that I had to cross off the list. And kind of where I'm sitting at with my Avengers Grail run, I only have 15 books left. So I've pretty much crossed off all of the big boys. We'll see. I think there's one kind of Neil Adams book, kind of at that like number 94 or something like that I still need, that generally speaking, people kind of upcharge for the most part. So that was kind of the last sort of expensive one I need. All right, and this last book I was able to get for myself was actually free, and it was given to me by Nicozo Comics, which I really, really appreciate. But hey, when you have a YouTube channel and you say to you guys that you are big fans of Dark Hawk, well, people just give you Dark Hawk books. This one right here, Dark Hawk, Heart of the Hawk, 8.0 grade. Now, I gotta say, CGC, what makes this an 8.0? I've been looking at this book. There's nothing on this that suggests to me that it should be an 8.0 grade. I mean, maybe the grader just like had to meet their quota. Maybe they put a fingerprint on it. I don't know. But obviously, being an 8.0 grade for this particular key, not necessarily a book that's going to go to the moon, but hey, for me, Darkhawk books, I always very much appreciate them, and I was very, very happy to have received it. Anyways, that's all for this video. That was my comic book haul. Let me spend a little bit of time just talking about, just the general show. Nearman Sundays, if you're ever in the Southern California area, definitely worth checking out, definitely worth going. A lot of more like mom and pop vendors. Obviously, there's some big vendors there as well, but, there's a lot of people that are just kind of, collectors / part-time dealers that, can really offer competitive prices for a lot of their inventory. And it was interesting to talk to a lot of people at the show. Obviously, great conversations, always great seeing people out there. But I generally felt there was enthusiasm. It was definitely a good turnout. There were a lot of people looking to buy, but I also kind of feel like, people were definitely more cautious on what they were spending money on. I mean, I think, if you're somebody who was there, who had some wall books, maybe you sold one or two, but it was going to be, a hard time kind of moving, like say a 4-figure book at that particular show. And I think that that's kind of where everyone is kind of in the current market. Not necessarily full apathy. I think that that's really something interesting that I kind of want to talk about later, is like later on, kind of maybe, I don't know, a month from now, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, if we're ever at a point in the comic book market where there's just this total sense of apathy, that to me is going to be a good indication of the true bottom. I feel like when people really don't care at all and they're just not talking about comic books, that's probably the time that is a good time to buy. And it'll be interesting to see if we ever kind of get to that point in the market. That's all I got for this video. That was just me kind of showing off what I got. Super happy to add these 2 Silver Age books to the collection. Very, very cool ones if you ask me. I will definitely be going to LA Comic-Con as well. I'll put together a fun video for us when I do go there, and I will talk to a lot of comic book dealers and collectors and see how they feel about the market. Anyways, that's all for this video. Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content. I'll see you in the next one.